Hello and welcome back to Season 2 of the podcast at the card table, where we discuss creation, practice, performance, and history with the greatest minds in Magic. I'm incredibly excited to let you know that this episode is also brought to you by MAGICBOX. They have all of your Magic needs covered, from the latest releases to absolute classics and all of the extras you could possibly need to keep you going. Make sure to check them out and use code PATCT at the checkout. That is PATCT at checkout for 10% off your next order. Until then, on with the episode. Today's guest is a UK-based performer, writer, designer, and consultant whose thinking has quietly powered some of the strongest mentalism of modern times. Widely regarded as one of the leading minds on playing card marketing systems and design-led deceptions, with work including the DMC Elites and the Elysian Duets. Not only is he a graphic genius, his effects are some of the most practical and deceptive displays of modern mind reading on the market. It is, of course, the astonishing Phill Smith. How are we doing today, Phil? You well?
I'm very good, thank you. That was a very kind introduction. I'm glad that the check obviously cleared. I can see that the
slipped a £5 under
there we go. Just faxed it to you.
A Blackpool over the counter. Perfect. We're going to hop straight into your origin story. We're going to go all the way back to when you first began, just to get that out of the way for anybody that might not know who you are or where you've come from. What is your origin story in Magic?
I had a magic book when I was a small child with me and my brother, learned how to do all kinds of card tricks, and then kind of never got over it, really. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I got properly into magic when I was at university. I joined a magic club in Leicester, which was great, and we happened to have loads of really good mentalists there for some reason, and kind of got the bug from that. That was about when Darren first landed. And so from that point forward, I feel like the die was kind of cast. I studied design, worked as a designer, and I've ended up doing a lot of design within Magic and developed my own materials. That's it. There you go. That caught you up quick, didn't it?
Perfect. Nice, like, 2-sentence answer, ready to go.
Right, yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned there you got into the Magic Club at university. What sort of journey came off the back of that? Was it finding a Magic Club within Leicester? Was it then going to a Magic shop? How did that journey then spur into sort of more of the professional side?
So it was the Leicester Magic Circle, which was is a very old magic club within the UK. And Leicester's a relatively small town in the middle of the UK for people who don't know. And it was the first time that I'd ever really met a bunch of magicians. And as a sort of, early 20s looking for a bit of direction in the world, I was kind of fascinated by their skill level, because obviously at that point I'd seen a lot of magic on TV, and you kind of understand that. Oh, hang on. Something's happened with the audio. Can you still hear me?
Yep, all good.
Okay, right. I don't know what the fuck's going on there. Hold on one sec. That's great.
Okay, right. Bluetooth headphones.
Yeah, there we go. They just beep, boop, boop, booped. Is that... Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
edit around that. Okay, sorry about that. So I was just fascinated by their skill level and the fact that it was obvious that they were just like normal people. So rather than being some mysterious TV magician, it's just like some guy who works as a plumber and then he can do this incredible card trick. So it felt like it was quite accessible in that world. And then obviously being around those people, seeing lots of lectures, you get properly onto the conveyor belt of magic and learning, sort of the ins and outs, technical stuff, mindset stuff, and then being immersed in it. And also it gave me the opportunity through one of these sort of programs that they had to be able to do a lot of magic as well. We could go out to charity events and stuff, and they'd put a team together. So that was, I think, a nice way to sort of cut my teeth and start doing magic in an environment where I'm with a bunch of other magicians to provide a bit of advice and support, which I still look back to these days as quite sort of formative moments. Yeah, it was good.
Obviously, you mentioned there that you were working events with other magicians. Obviously, I've heard of multiple magicians working the same event, but was this a club specifically designed for that?
It was it was just a thing that the Leicester Magic Circle offered. They called them at homes. So they would have a local charity would be organizing an event, and in order to they'd put on a fundraiser dinner or something, like the local, I don't know, whatever charity it is at a golf club or whatever, and for a certain cost the Magic Circle would send out 5 magicians to this charity event, and the cost they would put into their own charity. So it kind of just supported all of these different things. And it was a great opportunity for somebody like me who'd never performed in anger other than just for family and friends, to see not only what it's like to perform, but to be surrounded by other performers, professional performers, and be able to like model that a little bit and get some feedback from them. It was really good. I think it was something
Sounds
that
incredible.
I found like really, it was great.
I am on the council of the Newcastle Magic Circle, and I am going to politely steal that idea and pass it on to them, because I think that's a great way to support magicians. I've never really been aware that
it wasn't something that was quite commonly done, because it seemed like it was a win-win.
It makes sense. A
win for the charity, because they got a cheap team of magicians that helped them raise money for their event. It was a win for the circle because they had their own charity and they would be able to fund some of the circle activities. And for the individual magician, certainly for the ones like me who were still getting into it, it gives a progression structure where you can perform in a semi-professional environment, but without the pressure of being like the only magician at like a wedding or something. Right? If it goes wrong, it just goes wrong.
Whole day ruined. Bride and groom hate you for the rest of their life.
Yeah. That's it.
Perfect. We're going to hop into our sort of quickfire section. I say that in parentheses because this is never quickfire. So don't worry if you want to expand on the answers. By all means, do so, because single word answers.
I'll do it inconveniently quick. I'll just one word answers for everything. And short words.
I mean, I'm not sure how podcast listening is going to be with single word answers. Just blast out the next 8 questions and the longer questions later on. Just single word answer.
That's it. Yeah.
Shortest podcast episode physically possible. First one is, what is your favourite sleight? This doesn't necessarily have to be, obviously, stereotypically this would be card stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have to be cards. This could be a variety of other sleights.
I thought about this. I have got one, and it is the Fairy Dust by Think Win. I'm pronouncing his name.
I have never heard of this.
Anybody who's not familiar with that, search Think Fairy Dust, and it's on Alakazam, and it is the most magical card move, like genuinely magical, that I can do it, and I'm not 100% sure that I understand how it works. It's an animation, something similar to a haunted deck, in that you cut the deck, and they pick a card, you cut it into the middle, and there's a way of holding the deck and just doing something, and the card just very slowly comes out from the front, and it obviously not being touched. It is really cool. A lot of Think stuff is fascinating. If you've not seen that, it's my absolute
sensational. It's
wicked.
Purchasing that immediately after this.
I'm on commission, so it could be. I've never seen it. It could be.
Use code Phill Smith, 10% off.
No, it's a great little piece. Yeah, fascinating.
That sounds incredible. I can't wait to have a look at that and delve into it. What is it? Purely the concept and the fact that it just feels so great, but you don't really understand what's going on? Is that why?
There's an aspect to it like that, but it just, when you see it, you'll understand it. It looks super cool, and it looks like that in real life. It looks like there's a thread or something, but it's like you could do it with a borrowed deck. It's brilliant.
Incredible. It's I absolutely love haunted deck routines. Absolutely love them. But again, Red absolutely terrifies the shit out of us, because if it's gone, it's gone. And then what do you do from there? You stood over the deck trying to move it with your shadow, and you've got nothing. So
just hope you've got a heavy shadow. Yeah.
Perfect. Next one is, what is your favourite plot in Magic? This could be Magic, Mentalism, Stage. What is your favourite plot?
There's one that I think is really, obviously I'm predominantly Mentalism, and my default thought with this was that it's doing any kind of divination, somebody does a name divination or something like that. But there's a variation that this Ken Dine came up with that I think is one of the strongest things that is in that kind of space. So if you've got a peak wallet or whatever, I hope it's okay for me to it's not like a secret.
Providing we don't delve into methods. Yes, of course.
It's a good example of, I think, his thinking. And he basically says to the punter, if there was one thing that I could read from your mind that would convince you that I was a real mind reader, what would it be? And it's always something that's what's my cat's name, or sort of what's my password, or whatever it is. It's something that you, with your peak wallet or some kind of peak or Centitaire or any one of these millions of methods that we've got, can then find out, because you say, well, just so you don't change your mind, write it down or whatever. But it's a very clever gambit, because it gets them to say at the beginning what the most impressive thing would be, because your goal is to impress them. What is the most impressive thing that I can do? And then they're also kind of locked in, because when you've said, if I could read your mind and tell you what your cat's name is, then you'd accept that I'm a mind reader. Well, I just did. So
literally a verbal contract.
Absolutely genius. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, verbal contract sets the gravitas immediately.
very clever thinker, and it is like some details of Ken Dine's work has been quite influential for me because of his approach to stopping mentalism from being a little bit boring sometimes, maybe. Whisper it quietly, don't.
His books and his work are absolutely incredible. I feel like this episode's just going to be loads of things for me to just go back and look at, and I absolutely can't wait. On a slight side tangent, something that you mentioned there is having people write something down in mentalism is a topic that's a little 50-50 within mentalism, in that people often ask, what's your justification? What are your thoughts on that concept as a whole? Just get them to write it down.
It kind of depends on I think that's, but we talk about it being like magician thinking, worrying about that.
Yeah.
Is that we take for granted the existence, this is such an obscure answer to this, we take for granted the existence of the conceptual structure of a trick. And it's just like, we kind of take that for granted in the sense that nobody ever really thinks about it. We obviously think about the method and the presentation, but this idea that there is a framework of a thing that is happening, I am going to do a trick for you, and that we understand the exact parameters and boundaries of that without really thinking about it. But an audience member doesn't. So when anything you ask them to do, their default thought is, regardless of whether it is necessary for the method, this is a part of this thing that he's doing.
Yeah.
So it's not like you automatically get a pass. They can still think, I bet he wrote it down so that I could, like, he looked at it or something like that. But the construct itself has a kind of built-in, like pre-explanation. After that, I would usually have some kind of just very, very quick thing. So do you want to just jot that down so you can't change your mind? Or like write that down, but write it down like so that it gets as clear inside your head as possible. But like I generally would never like belabor the point that there's like a particular reason. It's just like write it down so you can't change your mind. Or I used to have like a big complicated script, which was kind of like, I've done this a lot of times. And at the end, sometimes people are so impressed or amazed or stunned that I've been able to, read their mind and tell them what their cat's name is, that when I say and ask, is that the one you were thinking of? They say no, because they're kind of shook and they don't want to feel like they're giving it away. So just so you can't possibly do that, and then have them write it down.
Yeah.
Do you need to do that? That's just it is an aesthetic thing. It is a presentational gambit. So the extent to which you present it in terms of you have to write it down for this is either intimately linked to the actual specifics of what the trick is that you're doing and what your presentation for it is, or it's just a stylistic thing. It could be one of a million different reasons, and that's up to you to pick. I don't like the arguments that people have about, should you have somebody write something down? I mean, if you need to have them write something down for the trick, probably you're going to have them write it down. If you can't think of a plausible reason for somebody to write it down, turn in your mentalism card. Send it back to us.
Yeah, and again, like, as soon as they've written it down, it doesn't make a difference anyway. Providing the structure of the routine kills any possible notion that you could have read it or peeked it or whatever, then it doesn't make a difference anyway.
I had a quite an interesting discussion with my friend Paul Brook about this a while ago, because when I do a business card peek called The Beers, and at the end of it, I never bring the card back out. It's gone like in my pocket inside a pile of business cards. And I said to him, because the last thing that I want is for them to, like, literally, for the last thing in the trick to be to go, and remember, you wrote this down. So if you pull it back out and be like, and that's what you wrote down, their last memory is a little reminder that they wrote it down. So just as they're going, wait, how did he know that? And you go, and don't forget, you wrote it down. And I was like, I don't like that. So I don't do it. So I generally, I conceptually minimize their writing it down by not bringing it back out.
Leaving that thought in their head that was just a thought of thing. It only existed
it's
in
like
their
when
mind
you're eating a
moment.
meal. Some people are like, they want the last bite to be the perfect bite because that's what you're going to take away with you. So sometimes it's a bit like that. And Paul was like, yeah, that's great. But when I do corporates, and he does a lot of corporates, they always go, is that what you wrote down? Let's have a look. And they want to see it. So I had to come up with a way of being able to do that. So that it still, so that it still makes sense within the framing. But like I thought that was quite interesting, and as well, that's why it's useful trying to get feedback from other people as well. Because like I said, I'm not a professional performer, so my experience is different from his experience.
Yeah.
Like he's right, and for my settings, I'm right. But you've got to kind of be able to adjust and have in mind the fact that the alternative viewpoint might also hit you at some point.
You're telling me in the magic industry that we're all welcome to our own opinions and we can still be right in our own individual settings?
Yeah, well,
Madness.
I know, that's quite revolutionary, isn't it?
Madness. I can imagine you probably have a pretty extensive library, but do you have a particular favourite book? Whether this is something that you keep going back to, or whether something that's sort of nostalgic or meaningful, is there anything that springs to mind or springs to hand?
It's I always mention this in like all the time. It's Ahead of the Pack by Jack Avis and Lewis Jones, in the hopes that they'll bring it back into print because it's a really good book. That's my favorite magic book. I remember reading it, and it's just these two old boys would sit in the pub and like discuss tricks and rebuild them so that it's like, oh, it has to be in a stack. Oh, could you do it from a shuffled deck? Or it needs this gaff. Okay, what if it didn't? You know, it's got a complicated sleight. All right, what if we didn't use the sleight? And in them gradually, and I kind of was fascinated by their approach to magic, and it felt like such a nice, like cozy book. Sometimes it felt a bit like you were sitting there chatting to them, going, "Oh yeah, great, I love all of that." And so and also it's got a really great layout, which is like something that
importantly for a designer,
it's the this is such a niche thing. It's got nothing to do with magic. Every chapter or every section starts on a right-hand page. And when each chapter starts on a right-hand page. And on the left-hand page, if there's a facing left-hand page that's got something, it's got a weird little magic joke. And it's that's for whatever reason, I really like that structure. So I kind of like a little bit try and duplicate that, because I design quite a lot of books for people. And in my own book, especially, I replace the jokes with quotes like about the mind and stuff like that. And what it does is it makes it a very accessible book. And that's one of the things that I like about this book, is that it's really, you could just like read the whole thing all the way through, because the structure is nice as well as the fact that the tricks are great.
Sounds incredible. Again, I've heard of this book, but I don't personally own it. So that is
I've never heard anyone else talk about it. It's not like it's one of these like hidden gems. It's just a book that I really like. Yeah.
I'm making a Phill Smith shopping list at the site here of all the things that you mentioned. Yeah, I'll just pick that up as well. Why not? This podcast becomes very expensive very quickly, because everybody's like, you should check out this. And I'm like, okay. Perfect. Do you have a particular favourite performance, whether it's something that you've seen in person, something that you've seen on TV, or something that you'd wish you'd seen? Is there anything that springs to mind?
I think probably the most, I've seen loads and loads of great tricks, and I'm not particularly difficult to fool, because I've got like quite a specific framework of things that I know. So there's a lot of stuff that will completely sink me. But I remember seeing Losander at a little very local magic convention in some like Holiday Inn hotel in the West Midlands somewhere, doing his full presentation of the floating table, the one where it also disappears at the end. Yeah. And I was sat, because I knew what he was going to do, and I've seen it, I know how it works, all of that stuff. I was sat as close as I could. So I was like in the corner in the front of these chairs. So like he's about 1.5 meters away from me. And it was the most magical thing that I've ever seen. It's such an incredible performance. His ability to do the mime aspect of it, every part of it, the music is brilliant. And I was there in the moment, and I was like, it was right there in front of me. And the whole time I was looking around being like, it's the most like prosaic location that this could possibly happen in. It's just this terribly lit,
such contrast between the beauty and
Holiday Inn. And yet this guy is just there doing this. And it was partly, I think, because of the fact that his performance did not in any way acknowledge that we were just in a function room in a Holiday Inn. He was like, I'm a magician. I do this magic, and you're going to get the full beans. All of them. You got the PA with the music, and he knows, everybody knows how it works. And yet, it was beautiful. It's an incredible effect. Yeah. Nothing that I could never do it, but just
even knowing how it worked. You still look at it and go, but how is he making it look?
The cloth down at the end. Like, I know where the table has gone.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it going, this guy's a genius. Like, not only has he invented this thing, but he's also just happens to be like the best dude in the world at performing it. which I also kind of find like fantastic. Yeah, that was great. Not the kind of magic I do, not the kind of magic I generally watch, not what I'm into, and yet to see it was like something special. And we had a little brief chat earlier, and we were talking about the position of secrets in the world of magic. And I think that knowing the secret did not diminish my enjoyment or perception of it whatsoever, because they're seeing it happen. All that happens is what you are impressed at with the piece changes from the fact that it's possible at all to his ability to do it and his like facility and skill at presenting it.
Yeah,
that's what I like took away. Loved it.
So beautifully choreographed. Like, even as I say, knowing how it's done, you still look at it and go, like, the movement's so natural. Everything just flows perfectly. You could tell the guy's done it for a long time, and it's
you can sometimes tell that you're looking at 10,000 performances of it rather than, you know. And it's and I think as well, accepting that it's not a magic trick so much as it is a piece of like theatrical mime, and that's what makes it work. And the magic aspect of it is just like a little, it's like cherry a little sprinkle of MSG on top of it to make it like hit a little bit harder. Because
I think if I was, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's a bit like, you know, you see the street performers where they've got the suitcase that doesn't move. And they can, like, there's no aspect of magic to that. But what I think, like, the levitating table is, it is essentially the same thing as that, but with magic added to it, which is like a really very small part of what he's physically doing is the magic aspect of it. And yet, you know, it does elevate it beyond that, just the aspect of mime. Yeah, I love it.
It's that deep set appreciation of skill. I saw a mime doing that specific briefcase thing yesterday on a video, and then halfway through he lets go of the suitcase, and the suitcase is floating in place, and he like moves his hands and then picks it back up again and then continues walking and places it down. And it was just, one, it caught me off guard because I was like, I'm following what's happening here, and then I was like, okay, fair enough. And two, again, just looking at it and going, I understand that you have put an unholy amount of hours into that to make it look that smooth, that beautiful. Having tried it in the past, I've just like found an old briefcase in the loft. I'd give this a go. Not a chance could I do that without I think thousands of hours.
Everybody's done that once or twice, haven't they? But that's like what you or I, when we've tried it with a briefcase once and gone, nah.
Nope.
Like, if you hadn't have gone, nah, and spent like the next like 3 months on it, probably would be able to make it look sick. But it's like, I always remember as a kid watching skate videos when you see these people landing these incredible tricks, and you think that that's what's impressive, is the fact that they can just land these tricks. And then you actually watch the behind the scenes video and you're like, that guy fell over 84 times. And what's impressive isn't his ability to do the trick, it's his ability to not do the trick and then try again. And it's that, like, I think that's what elevates people who have got that very high level of
real
ability.
Well. If I was playing Phill Smith Bingo, Lysander's Table was not on my list, but
no, it was sick. I love it.
I'm very happy that was an answer. This one might be a little bit more difficult because, again, taking such an abundance of influential people around you, and I know a lot of them are your friends now as well. If we were to ask you to try and narrow it down to 5 or 6 people, who would you say have been your biggest influences in magic and mentalism?
Sorry. That's a very good question. Biggest influences.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be magic and mentalism. It could be like comedians, could be music.
The first thing that I remember like being like super impressed with I was when Darren's first specials landed. It's almost every UK mentalist is, and you notice that there's a bracket of them around about my age. That's not a coincidence. You know, there's like, you've got your Paul Brooks, your Kennedys, your Luch. That's not a coincidence. And there's a bunch of other dudes who I haven't ever designed anything for who I think of. So, you know, his first performance was fantastic. The first like TV show when he hit with that whole thing, and everything since then that he's done has kind of just been expanding on that initial concept. Fascinated by that, and remember being really interested by it. I got a bunch of like mentalism texts after that, and then kind of immediately following on from that was Banachek, because I got his psychological subtleties, and that again was like very early in my like process. and just being absolutely fascinated by the idea that this study of magic that I'd been into was obviously going off into some slightly different, weirder directions that had aspects of psychology in it, and understanding the positioning of that within the sort of pantheon of methods. That was interesting. So Banachek and Darren for sure. Loads of other, TV performers and people that I've seen. I remember, obviously, everybody in the UK over a certain age watching Paul Daniels on TV. And I think that, although it sounds really stupid, that was quite influential. Although I don't, do any Paul Daniels stuff. I don't really study his work or anything like that. It was just that as a punter at the beginning of my awareness of magic within media. He just seemed like such a cool individual. And I think that a lot of the people that he'd have on, the guests that he would have on his program, and they were all kind of highlighted and elevated as being people who were of note within this little universe, was an intriguing idea. And I think that as well, that sort of early, very positive association with magic, it's difficult to get away from that. It's part of the fundamentals of what I think of when I think of magic is a generation of people in the UK is Paul Daniels. even if you don't like him, it's still just put a brand on magic at a time when I was understanding what magic was, I guess. There you go.
Yeah, of course. And as you mentioned there, introduced so many people into sort of the public facing eye for magic as well that might not necessarily have gotten that sort of step up unless they'd gone on that. I know obviously a lot of the people that were on there were also very big magicians in their own rights already before that. But
I think if you go to Blackpool, for example, and you look at a lot of the magicians there, the guys who go and do gigs, who've got they're out at the restaurant on Friday night because they've got a residency there, and then Saturday they're doing a wedding. A lot of them have got a very specific kind of presentation, not to in any way to diminish it. But I think that a lot of that is without them ever realizing it, based on Paul Daniels, that his particular style of magic, his manner more than anything about this, that he's the cheeky chap. He's this he's got a funny line. He's got a few put downs, so he's a little bit don't mess around with him because he'll make which is the stuff that he got from working in the working men's clubs. And I think that he provided a template, but without people realizing it, for people to become a magician. And if we'd have had a program that had been equally as successful and enduring with a magician who was more esoteric and I don't know, slightly occult, then I think, again, without realizing it, that would be the stylistic influence that would have come generationally, down the line, or whatever that style would be. I think it's not a coincidence that there is a particular prevalent style in magic that is just very similar somehow, by accident, by coincidence, to this guy who was very famous as the face of magic 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely been a more subtle influence than the likes of Darren, for example, but in a very similar arc of sort of giving people the framework and the personality to base off of to then bounce.
I think it's that. I think that it's that, that it's maybe a generational thing. But
it makes you wonder, if those people, for example, Darren wasn't necessarily first choice for the Channel 4 specials. We had Nyman and we had Mark Paul. It makes you wonder, what would the industry be like had those other people have taken places? Or what would the industry have been like had Paul Daniels have been replaced with somebody else? Would it have shaped in a totally different way, or would it have still...
I think I'm always fascinated by that question. So what would have happened if Jimi Hendrix hadn't have died? What would would he be? What would it made in a butterfly effect way a big difference to modern music? Would it have just been more or less exactly the same as it now, except you can go and see, oh, he's getting a bit old now, but he's still got it. How would it have been? What would there's no way to say, but I think that there is an aspect of that like you said, that Paul Daniels' influence is more subtle than say Darren or David Blaine.
Yeah.
But in a way, I think it's a little bit more that it's just more. It's hard to say. So like fundamental or prevalent, because it's like if the first time you ever see a person who does a particular thing, they are a particular way. You will never be able to get away from the association between. So if the first time you ever saw a policeman, it was somebody rescuing a cat from a fire versus, them kicking your neighbour's door in and storming around and beating them up. There is no way from that point forward that you do not have like a subliminal, subconscious association of that person or that field with that particular behavior. So if you grew up every Friday night watching Paul Daniels doing magic, and he's got this particular way of being, he's very funny, he's a bit sort of dry and self-deprecating, he's got these old-fashioned jokes and he acknowledges that they're a little bit silly, he talks about the heritage and history of magic, and he's got like tricks that no one can explain. That becomes like a kind of mental template. So even though you might never stylistically match or look at magic and think, that's what I want to do, when you think of a magician, that is the shape that every other magic thing is put into. And I think that because he was a very, people watching this who aren't from the UK or aren't from my generation won't know, but he was just on TV at a time when there was like 4 channels, 3 channels. So when he was on TV and you went into work or school or something the next day, everybody had watched it. So it had that kind of cultural cachet that doesn't exist in the same way now. And he was on TV for a very long time. So it was like, less so now, but when I was first going out doing magic, and for maybe a decade after that, that is what people would say. That did you used to watch Paul Daniels? Or like, did you see that Paul Daniels thing? And then obviously, as new people come through, or if you change what you're doing, it sequences through. But it sort of this is like a deep waffle. This is, isn't it? Wasn't I just going to give you one answer? Hang on.
Quick fire section.
Who's your biggest influences? Paul Daniels.
Perfect. That's another thing in itself. Oh goodness, my brain just completely derailed.
That's the first
difference. What was it? Oh yes, the sort of cultural like head figures in magic over generations. Like some people I'll speak to and I'll be like, oh, did you see Darren Brown's new thing? And they'll be like, what is a Darren Brown? And I'm like, oh, have you seen Dynamo's new thing? And they go, oh yeah, I know who Dynamo is.
Yeah.
And it's being able to tell how old somebody is just based on like what magician is prevalent in their brain.
Yeah,
it's quite an amusing thing. Next one is, we're going to take a little bit of a dive here. We're going to go to magic industry gripe. Is there anything in the industry that either you dislike or doesn't belong, or you think maybe is overperformed or overdone?
We've got to talk about the video interface on the Penguin website. Sorry, no, it's a little callback there for literally nobody else apart from you.
For those that didn't tune in to this before we hit recording, I was having a rant about the old, outdated media player on the Penguin website, as to which we will tune into Phil's lecture later on. But thanks for that. I'm now going to have Eric Tate knocking on my front door.
He already knows, I'm sure. Now, what don't I like him? I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with magic beef when magicians have got when they've got beef, because like on one level, give me that tea. I want to know about the beef. But also, a lot of the time, I think that realistically, as an actual real person, rather than just somebody who is trying to find a bit of drama. I find the way that people deal with a lot of the issues within magic a bit weird.
Yeah.
Like they seem to have forgotten that we exist within a broader world that has normal ways of doing things. And there you go, magic beef. I find people take it too far, don't understand that it just most people are just trying to get by, and there's like there might be a misunderstanding of some way, but there's so much ego involved in what we do for some reason. As though it's like important in a grand like overall scheme of things.
Yeah.
But
magic being that massive thing in society that directs everything.
Like when I talk to people about like that I know about like Blackpool Magic Convention, I said, "Oh, it's like it's the world's biggest magic convention," and it is for magicians. It's huge. But we went to a quilting exhibition at the NEC, the National Exhibition Centre here in the UK, quilting, and it was 8 times bigger than Blackpool, 10 times bigger than Blackpool, easily. It was like, if people are familiar with the NEC, it is a very large venue specifically designed for like conventions and exhibitions, and it was like 3 halls of the NEC for quilting, and it was like crafts and stuff like that, and it was not just like 4,000 people, 5,000 people like you get at Blackpool, but 15, 20,000 people, more than that coming through. It's running the whole weekend, businesses based around this entire little world. No one really knows about quilting. Yeah. And yet it's this little tiny, it dwarfs magic globally as an enterprise. And I always remember that. I always think, why have I got into magic instead of quilting? It could have been cleaning up.
Quilting designer. There we go.
Yeah, but like, but essentially, like people think that if they're a big deal in magic, they're in some way a big deal.
Yeah,
but, like no.
And then you've got Facebook groups fueling that fire.
Oh my god!
I'm not even going to start on that. That's a rabbit hole. Yeah. Perfect. Obviously, as we mentioned there, you've held a lot of roles within your career. You've been a creator of magic, a designer, a consultant, performer. Which role sort of forefronts and drives the other ones? And is there a particular order of importance or like favoritism for you or enjoyment? Or are they all in a similar sort of playing field? Or do they deliver different things?
It's more of a spectrum of different things that if you looked at like a diagram of all of those different roles that I undertake, I kind of just have like artist at the middle.
Yeah.
And then that is everything else is kind of like different manifestations of that. I try and see what I do through that lens, and everything that I'm in terms of doing work for other people, doing my own design work, developing routines, writing, consulting on other people's things are like I have a kind of vision of magic, of like something that I want to communicate, and which is itself an interpretation of just the way that the world is. And then everything that I do is in some way, an exploration of that. Is that pretty esoteric? Yeah, that's like, but I guess that's it. That they're all just different avenues to like create build a story of some way, or like explore an idea, and everything has got some like aspect of that in it. So even when I'm doing if I'm doing design work for other people, then what you're going to get at the end of it is going to be, their idea filtered through this lens that perhaps highlights the aspects of their idea that are things that I want to like explore or highlight as a way of like chewing through these ideas.
Yeah.
I although I'm aware that what we do is in a way quite sort of frivolous, and that I'm inventing like card tricks for somebody to do at the pub. It's not like I'm curing cancer. It's just like a curio and an entertainment. Yeah. I do take it quite seriously, and I try and put as much sort of like effort and thought and like depth into it, so that if people just want a cool trick, then it's just a cool trick. But if there's some second level to it, then I try and make sure that is reflected. Yeah, artist. There you go, art. And then everything is coming off that.
But I'm gonna, next to your like magic category, it's just gonna say artist. We're not gonna mentalist, creator, all that. Nice. There we go. Nice and easily packaged into that.
It's a thing.
Do you know roughly how many projects you've worked on, like other people's projects? Because in doing the research for this, my goodness, have you had your fingers in many different projects? It's crazy.
It's been a lot. So you can see I've got my bookshelf here, my Billy bookshelf from IKEA. And this row just here, is that the row? Wait a sec, is it that row? That's the row. That row there are all books that I've designed. Let me move the mic so you can see. That's the Peter Turner books just there. That's
Ken Dine's books over there as well.
Ken Dine's book is just there, I think. Ben. And I've done a lot. And my mum came round, like, kind of was showing off, like, oh, I did all of these. And so she counted them. There's like 40 something books there, which was way more than I thought that I'd done. So I think it's just like I've done a lot over the years, and because I think it's just like I said, you kind of got to endure, you got to hang around a bit so that you can try and put your stamp on things. Yeah. And I also I'm always aware, like I said, that in some regards, what I'm trying to do is to like have just a finger on the tiller, just have some kind of steer on the kind of like the aesthetic of magic, so that in some way, when people think, like I said, about magic. As a layperson, they might think about Paul Daniels, that in like some little 0.5% way, when a magician thinks about magic, that there is some aspect of, what I've worked on, some ideas that I think are important, have managed to sort of sneak into magic and steer it a tiny bit.
Yeah, you posted a picture of all of those books recently on your Instagram on the shelf in like a carousel. And again, looking through those, I was like, oh wow, I didn't even realize that you'd partaken in that. And what's I think the most fun about that image especially is that even though each of those projects is so completely different and every single one has a completely different nook, a completely different feel to it, it still has the Phill Smith like hook. You can still see that it's one of your designs, which I think is incredibly cool. When you come to designing stuff like that, is it taking their personality and character and shaping it in your way, or is it just whatever feels right for that project at the time?
A little. I mean, everything. What feels right for that project is what feels right for me, and so what feels right is always going to be a manifestation of how I see the thing. But there are projects like we did a book. We did a bunch of redesigns. Like it's a bit of a cheat because a lot of those books are books that Murphy's have asked me to design. So it's not like I redid Michael Lamar's book. But it's not like Michael Lamar called me. I just was just like, it's something that Murphy's wanted redesigning.
Yeah.
But like, so there's like a Nick Trost book, which I thought was like, I remember getting that quite early on I borrowed it from the Leicester Magic Circle because they had like a little library. And it's kind of, in my mind, it became this kind of like quite foundational text. So when I was designing it, I was like, I want it to feel like this is a foundational text because that's how I feel about it. So when people see it on the shelf, I want it to have some aspect of that to frame the design and what it looks like when you're going through it. Obviously, I can't change what it says. Like everything that's in there is in there. But it's that, like with the books, especially sometimes, like how do I feel about this book? How do I feel about the person who wrote it? How can I tell that story using what I know how to do? So like the Peter Turner books is a series of books that Murphy's again asked me to do. And it was his 13 PDFs in this masterclass. And whilst I just spent ages and ages sitting thinking about it, about like how we're going to, because it's an enormous project to put together and you don't want to have a book that's too big. And it would have ended up being something like 1,200 pages. And I was like, no one's going to want to sit and read a 1,200-page book.
Wedge.
Yeah. It's like Mind, Myth, and Magic times 2. So I was like, once I started thinking about how are we going to split it up, I started thinking about that it could be like individual books, one for each. That's the obvious way of doing it.
Yeah.
And then I had this idea of like that they could almost be in disguise. So that like because you can't take all of them with you, you might just take one. And I was imagining somebody taking one of these books out with them and sitting on the train or sitting. And I was like, but you wouldn't want to know. You wouldn't want people to know that you're sitting learning how to hypnotize people. So I kind of designed each one of the books to look like it's this old-fashioned sort of novel. And so they're all in disguise as these sort of like pulp novels. And so once I started thinking about that, I was thinking about like Peter Turner's character and like how they would look or what the stories would be for each of them. And so that it's become this like boxed set of these sort of like weird pulp novels from the 50s and 60s, each with a different genre, because they're all from different parts of Magic. And then, I'm kind of amazed that Murphy's decided to go with that, because it's got nothing to do with anything.
So fucking cool.
It was but that's part of it, as well as I think that I wanted to be able to make the project, because it was when it first came, about 10 years old. So when the project first came out, I think that people were very excited about it because it was something new, and it was a great way to get into, Peter Turner's sort of like oeuvre. But I wanted to be able to create something that is now, 10 years later, even though the material isn't brand new, has a fresh kind of feeling, and that it's like a product that people are going to want to buy. Because that's my obligation as a designer, is not just to make something that I think looks cool, but also that it's going to not just sit on shelves. So somebody will see it in a magic shop and like, what the hell am I looking at? What's that? And then it just be so cool that they want to get a copy of it. Yeah.
How do you find that balance between it being visually pretty, but also still maintaining the sort of character of the book? Because at the end of the day, in the smallest sense, it's an instruction manual.
Oh yeah,
but you've made it look absolutely gorgeous. How do you balance?
So there's been a few examples of that. With that one, because it had never had a physical print, I was kind of free to do whatever I wanted with it. But quite interesting, like one of the things that I've tried to do with the these things, because Murphy's own the sort of back catalogue of books from L&L. And for a lot of them, they don't, this is just inside baseball, it's not super interesting, but they don't have, because of the way that the companies have changed hands and the IP has changed hands, and a lot of these books are 15, 20, 30 years old, there's no original files for them. So I can't just get an InDesign or a Quark Express or a Word document or whatever. All they've got is a scan of the book, or sometimes they have to like get the book scanned or like, all they've got is an ebook, and the ebook isn't high enough resolution to go to print. So they need somebody who knows how to put a book together to get it ready to print, because they want to take these books to print. And so whilst we're doing that, often what we'll try and do is make it not look like a book that was put together in 1997, make it feel like a 2026 book. So do like a visual update and a refresh, but also keep some of the elements and visual styling of the original. So often that'll be like, I don't want to redo all of the illustrations, but I have to have a way to up-res them. So we'll process that, rework the layout so that it fits a little bit better in a way that's easier to do now, because we're using digital tools rather than doing like a book from the 60s or something that might have been like laid out on a linotype machine. And then although you don't necessarily see them as iconic products in the same way as like branding works out in the normal world, there are book covers, and like some of these books have got a particular look that people will maybe recognize from having seen. And I try and rework the book so that they are like visually rhyme with what the original design was. So like for the Nick Trost book, the original looked a little bit choppy, but there were elements of the design that I quite liked the concept of. And so those are the bits that we kept. And then we had to rejig other bits and pieces, tidy them up, use a different font, maybe just make it a little bit more modern, come up with a different way of presenting it so that it'll print in full color, so that it looks nice, which is something they couldn't necessarily do when they blah, 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 blah. So it's a combination of that, like, what's the vision for the book, what's the original theme of the book and the feel for it, and what's technically possible now, or like easy to do in a way that's not going to spend like 3 months putting it together, because Murphy's won't want that. And so it's a case of like going through all of those and like mashing them together and hoping that at the end of it there's a nice product. And we've been pretty good so far. There's some of the like the Murphy's reissues I think are really nice. Very proud of them in a way.
Your work's stunning. It's design in Magic isn't something I'd really sort of thought about in general until recently. I listened to a podcast. It was not even a Magic related podcast, but it was Alex from the Neat Review talking to somebody about his work. And I hadn't thought about how much of a like thing design in Magic was. It was just like, oh, it's got a cover on it. Like, that is that. You pick it up, you read the contents. Nobody thinks about the outside of it. But when you get into the like cusp of it, my goodness, there's so much thought goes into it. And when you look at something and you go, wow, this is stunning, you can tell how much like effort and feeling and passion and like you say, like visual homage to previous projects has gone into it.
Yeah. I mean, there's still there's a commercial aspect to it because you want it to be a certain way. But like when I put a compilation of my books together called Mythology Codex, and I knew as I was developing it that it was going to be everything that I'd worked on, and I wanted it to make it like this is going to sound, I don't know, like cynical or weird, but like that there was going to be a lot of work involved in it, and I wanted to make it quite an expensive product, it was an expensive book. And Magic's got quite a lot of expensive books because of you're not going to sell loads and loads of them. So you have to, if you want to put a lot of work into them, you have to put the price up a bit. And so the problem then is, if you look at people have released things in the past that haven't been very well received and that they've not been very nicely presented. So there was a book that a magician whose name I won't mention, but I'm sure a few people know who it is, released this like book that costs like £200 or something like that. And this was a while ago, so it was back when £200 was more than the cost of a loaf of bread and a pint of petrol. And people complained because when it came, it was just a loose leaf in a box. It was just printed onto regular like photocopy paper and put in a box, not even bound. Yeah. And so their disparity between it, they're like, this costs a lot of money, and then when it turns up, it looks like this. So when I have done books that I want to like sell for a premium price, you kind of like got to make it feel like with my Mythology Codex. What I wanted was that when somebody opens that box, from the packaging, having spent 150 quid on a book, their first thought isn't, oh, you know.
That's a
the missus is going to say, how much did that book cost? 150 quid. Well, so like, I wanted it to be so fancy that when somebody knows how much it costs, they're like, yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it is nice. And so it is a tool, a storytelling tool of the actual design in that way. It would have been pretty straightforward for me to make that book look professional and slick, but not quite as like lavish and over the top. And its lavish and over the topness is like an intentional, like directional thing.
Adds to the character.
Yeah, and it frames people's perception of the contents as well. That I used to like teach on a product design course in Coventry, just doing the colouring in stuff, teaching the students how to do all of the rendering. And I kind of had to pitch this idea to them that if you present in two different ideas, which are of exactly equal merit, so neither of these ideas is better than the other one. If one of them is better presented, it will be perceived as a higher quality idea. Yeah. So if it's presented in a very like a particular way, that's how people will perceive it. So if it's presented in a very high quality way, then their first thoughts are always going to be of it as a high quality product. And then whether it is or not is down to the quality of the product. But assuming that you've got that baseline. And it's like that thing about if you have two bottles of wine, one of them's got a very basic design for the label, and the other one has got a very luxurious design for the label. People's experience of drinking the luxuriously labeled wine is going to be better. And it's like a placebo effect, but they genuinely do perceive it to be better. It's not like they are making it up or that they're somehow tricking themselves. So I guess that's in some way true.
Yeah.
But their experience is genuinely better. So if you can like present something, it's the same with it. Like if somebody's got a trick and they've got a shit presentation for her, can I swear shit? Yeah. Hey, nothing happened. You have not been cancelled.
No.
If they've got a shit presentation for her, the trick is no better or worse.
Yeah.
But if they are up against somebody who's got a good presentation for it, then the deceptiveness of it will be better, because like almost every aspect is elevated by like the quality of how that aspect is presented.
It's strangely something that we've noticed doing the Fringe Festival for the past few years up in Edinburgh. If you hand somebody a leaflet that's on like 80 GSM, it's in the bin at the next possible opportunity. If you hand somebody a leaflet on 240 GSM, it feels like a premium thing, and it reflects on how premium your show is as well. If you're willing to put so much effort into the poster and even just the paper quality and the print quality, that reflect the product itself, like you've mentioned there. And I think a lot of people forget at the end of the day, books spend 99% of their time on a shelf looking pretty. So why not make it this beautiful piece of art in itself? The contents could be great, but at the end of the day...
And the flip side as well is that, like, you're existing in a world where it could be just an ebook download. So what's the benefit of it being more expensive and having to physically ship it around the place? What's the advantage of it being a physical? There is something intangibly like interesting about it being a physical product. So how can you leverage that? And that's going to be down to like the design and manufacture and production. And those are the kind of decisions that influence things. But like, it's part of all like visual art and all kind of like creative work like we do, that these are all of the little details and the intangible bits and pieces that you kind of have to focus on in order to allow the bit that we are more specifically interested in, like the method, the techniques, the magic, the thing that we think of as the magic, the tricks, to like be as like well received and perceived as possible.
We jumped down a rabbit hole there, but this topic is so interesting to me, and I don't know if it's interesting to the guys at home listening, but it's one of those things that like it's just stuff that's not discussed in Magic and not even, I think, thought about in general, because it's just one of those things where you just go, the product just shows up, I read it, I put it away. But
I think that there's a lot of aspects of my thinking on a lot of these things which are about that there are these kind of like hidden systems in a way, things that we perhaps are so used to that we don't think about what their impacts are. And that's like, I think that that's a part of my kind of like philosophy of Magic, that we talked about the influence of people like Paul Daniels that we don't really think about, how you don't necessarily think about how the design of the book makes you feel about something. Yeah. But then there's also these there are these like invisible systems. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then, but that influences a lot of my other stuff as well, because like, if you think about like the marking systems that I use on the decks, that there is an invisible system at work that, if you know it, allows these things to happen.
Yeah.
Or like if people are familiar with my book, that there's a picture hidden in the side of the book. And it was this, like, if you know how to use the book, then this hidden world is opened up to you. And depending on how you read it, then there's two different aspects of it. And it's all of those. When I talk about what I do, having the word artist in the middle of it, hopefully that's, I don't know if anybody's ever going to perceive any of this as like decoding sort of the works of Phill, but it's not just like pretty pictures. There is a little extra to it.
True art to it. Yeah. I'm going to get on to the next question, because I feel like I could delve into this topic for the next like week. And I know we've got a finite amount of time here, so I'm going to push on.
We'll cover that again after we've hung up.
Yeah, of course. You create, obviously, a ton of material that looks very natural and non-magic. How do you go about making your stuff look less magic-y and store-bought and giving it the application that it like fits in the real world? Because I feel like a lot of tricks nowadays are very plasticky, they'd look like a magic trick. And it's, again, another topic of conversation is why have you pulled out this weird item? You're a magician. You could pull out a weird item. Shut up. That's not even to be discussed. How do you do that, and how can other people try and apply that to the stuff that they do?
I guess there's that sort of the old adage of all creative thought, like, oh, you got to think outside of the box, and it's like a real cliche that idea. And most people aren't sort of really think too much about what it means. It just means just do something unexpected, maybe. But in this case, that there is like the received wisdom of Magic about like things have to look a particular way in Magic for no real reason other than that's just kind of like momentum. That's how it's been.
And that's how it comes from China. That as well.
Well, maybe a little bit. But thinking about things in terms of, like I mentioned, the books that I did for Peter Turner have got like what I call the disguise. So a lot of the stuff that I work on, I try and think about what the disguise is going to be. So if I did one of the early projects that I worked on with Craig Petty was this sort of Lego deck. And it could just be a magic prop. It could just be a deck of cards, and each one's got a picture of a Lego model on it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. fine. But like we kind of sat down and thought about like in universe, in the Craig Petty extended universe, the cinematic universe. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. What is this thing? So when you take it out of your pocket and put it down on the table and a spectator sees it, what do they think it is? And that's kind of that's what I call the disguise for a lot of these products, because you don't also want to have the name of the product on there. So they'll go, what was that called? Let me just Google that. Oh, it's Trick These Cells. And so a lot of the time that kind of drives it, like kind of like influences it. And it creates the boundaries within which you've got to work, because every part of the design has to logically fit that. So every part of that Lego deck, which was called Mind Blocks, I think was the actual trick release, had like packaging details that kind of told a little tiny bit of the story. And I did, when I was at uni back a million years ago, I did a games design module doing multimedia design. And part of that is what's called environmental storytelling, which is that as you move around the environment in the game, what story are the things that you see telling you? So, like there's like my final project was this part of it was a 3D model of a crashed plane. And so that like the details inside tell the story about what happened without there ever being a block of text or a book to read. Yeah. Just walking around and looking, you can kind of backward engineer what the story was. And so when I'm designing things like this, like Lego deck, in a way, that is an element of environmental storytelling, because you don't ever necessarily have to say what it is. Yeah. Because it's obvious what it is. It is a deck of cards for kids to shuffle and then take a model and then build that model. Yeah. You don't ever, you can say it and explain it if you want, but it is kind of, that story is pre-told. So anything that you do that fits in with that is just going to bolster that. And I think that approach is something that hasn't necessarily been exploited as much as it could be in Magic, in terms of certainly like printed things. So like if there's a deck of cards, what is that deck of cards? Yeah. I'm working on a project at the moment with Craig that has got a weird prop in it, which is something that you wouldn't normally have. And we're kind of like, we're doing this process where we're just like gradually work our way around to a story that does make sense about what it is. So when you put it down on the table, and I think that this is like what I think maybe I talked about having a finger on the tiller, is that maybe this is an approach other people will do in Magic in terms of building their own tricks that they can use more of that like environmental storytelling with the props.
Yeah. Being a massive fan of like escape rooms and murder mysteries, my brain immediately went to the product in itself is the murder victim, and you're collecting all of the evidence around it to recreate this story to figure out what has happened to get you to this point. That is sort of how my brain like pieced that all together.
Yeah. And there's another element to it in terms of the deception of what we do, which is that like at the end of the process, like at the end of they've done this trick with the Lego deck, and they go, "Oh, this is it was just a sleight of hand thing. He just palmed one of the cards off, or whatever the hell it is, the thing." But if at the end of that they still believe that is a real Lego deck, rather than just like, I bet that's just a magic trick, then
the win.
I've kind of won.
Yeah.
But it's another level. It's another level of like. And that like that's like an approach that I use a lot.
It's like those, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear, it's those 1% changes, those little micro adjustments and those micro changes that you make that make this whole product like what it is. It's those little deceptions, those little bits of storytelling that create this world around that item.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time sort of thinking about what that like if there's an approach that I've got like that, often I'll try and dissect it so that I can see is like understand how it works, and then maybe turn it up to 11 or 12 so that I can make it as effective as possible. And I have thought quite a lot about that. Like I call it hyper-realism of some of these products, that they need to look like they are real things, but they're real things from like another universe. So even if the universe that they're from has got like a ridiculous concept or a ridiculous premise, it still logically fits, so that there's a bit of, for people to disagree with it, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance for them to be like, well, that's not real.
Yeah.
But he's got that, like
it's there.
So I do this this thing I've got, inexplicable thrift store find, uses these sort of old props, old looking props.
Yeah.
At the end of it, they go, well, like, it's obviously a trick, but like, at what point, where in this like layers and layers of nonsense does the trick stop?
Yeah.
That's the, there you go. Flood the zone. That's the phrase, isn't it? With all of this sort of.
That one product in particular is the one thing that sort of spurred this question, because it's the perfect example of, I found this item in a thrift store. Here is a beautiful story that goes along with it. That just happens to be a trick at the same time, as opposed to, here is a trick that I've horseshoed the story into with this really weird prop.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in season 1, there are tons of recommendations from the guests of new tricks, new books, new theories, new ideas that I always want to go back and delve into even more. And in order to do so, I need to buy those products. And where am I going to buy them from? MAGICBOX. That is the obvious answer to this. They have everything that I could possibly need and the expert knowledge to give me the assistance that I need to find exactly what I'm after. And using code PATCT at checkout, you can grab yourself 10% off your order. That's code PATCT to grab 10% off. On with the episode. We are going to move on to a section called Annotated ERDNASE, in which we're going to quickly watch a performance on apparently this disheveled media player that you called me out for over on Penguin. We're going to take a look at one of your routines from there, and then we'll quickly,
imagine if it doesn't work now.
It
just crashes.
We'll quickly discuss some of the sort of concepts and ideas that brought you to this piece. Excellent. So let's take a quick look at this, and we'll get into the story behind it.
Could you both stand just here, if that's okay? What are your names? Carl. Carl, nice to meet you, Carl. And Steve. Imagine we were in an actual venue and I come sidling up like the slightly unwanted violinist that sometimes we find ourselves being. I'm going to make a little tiny prediction for you guys. If I'd have been prepared, maybe this could already have been sorted out.
I had so long to prepare, and yet I somehow forgot to do that.
I think that will be okay.
Not like the prediction's the important part of this.
Could you do me a favour? Just touch any 2 fingers. Those 2? Mm-hmm. Actually, I'll tell you what, Carl, if you could just be honest with me. If you were going to chop one of these 2 fingers off, which one would it be? This one? That one there. Tell you what, grab a hold of it. Mm-hmm. That's the one that's going. Yep. Now, you just saw, like, I made a prediction. You made a series of random decisions, and I did make a prediction. Mm-hmm. I think that this is going to blow you away, actually. I'm not sure. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Yeah. No one's ever really ready for this, if we're being honest. I know. Yeah. That's what I thought, yeah.
How?
I'm sensing more laughter than sort of a wow. Yeah. I did make a little extra prediction that you would pick this one when you came out, so maybe not a complete sort of weird thing. Nice.
Right, the crowd goes mild.
Part of what I do is about...
We're going to hold that there.
Who even is that guy?
It's night and day different. You look like do you know roughly how long ago this was?
It was June 21st, 2015, because I've got my little penguin avatar on the wall up there in the shed. So 11 years ago, nearly. Ago.
My goodness. A little bit of change since then, apparently.
What was funny is when I was going to say, like, because we were talking about what my video is going to be for this. I was going to say none of what I do now is that everything is completely different, and that is 100% exactly how I do that trick now. Literally, no aspect of it is changed at all.
Scripting's identical.
It's like the great white shark having like survived since the Jurassic era without any evolutionary changes because it's perfect. That's that routine.
It's so good. It's so like disarming as well, and I think it has the same level of humor. Like dry humor as that whole prediction thing where you cover your hand and get somebody to name a number, and it has that same level, and then you get that kicker at the end where they're like,
it's not a
fair
particularly
enough.
huge kicker at the end. It's still just a little ha ha ha. Anyway, it's just an opener that I used to use a lot when I did go and do tables and stuff, because I found that as a mentalist, like a lot of the stuff that you can do, it's a little bit processy. You've got to get a lot of stuff out, and there's a whole lot. But I wanted that because there's nothing to bring out apart from if you're not prepared, you have to write a little note. And all of these like little details are like exist because of that, because it's a way to immediately get into doing a trick without having to take anything out. You have to kind of like shake hands and reminds me to be personable, which I do need reminding sometimes. And it kind of just makes it clear that you're here to play, but you also kind of can do some stuff that they can't immediately explain. And it just frames what comes next, that you're not going to be super serious. And I know like quite a lot of people who do perform that as their opener when they're doing mentalism, just because it's something that's quite sort of light and mental flavored rather than being super serious. And then they can, dig in later on once you've got their attention.
Yeah, it perfectly sort of, one, disarms them because they have this preconceived notion going into it. Like when you come in and you say, I'm the mind reader, immediately they're like, bam, Darren Brown. Then you hit them with this and it's like, okay. Like, this guy knows how to have fun. This isn't this otherworldly, godlike figure who's going to come over here, be above us all, and read my mind.
Yeah, and quite explicitly, this moment when you do this is like you're saying, you might as well like literally say, I know what you expect, and I'm not that. But I know it. I know what you expect, because they are like, oh, this guy's got, I bet he's got it written on a bit of paper in his pocket. Yeah. And they're already thinking ahead about it. He must have 3 or 4 of them in there, so no matter which one I picked. And then when you bring it out, they're like, no, it's not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then you've got them slightly not off balance, but just like you can kind of reset them, and then you're free to do what you wanted to do rather than be what they expected you to be.
When you came up with this like routine, was that the purpose in mind? Was it to be this opener that introduces you, or was it just a fun thing that then happened to shape into sort of the perfect opener?
I think that it kind of like, I just like that that's the joke came before everything else, and then I realized that actually if you did that, then you can like pretty easily do a equivocate piece based on that. And then once you've it's such a quick thing to do, it just feels like a natural lead into something else, so it just finds its place as I don't know that it's necessarily a great opener, because it's not particularly strong. It's just funny. So for certain performances, or if you want to, I tell you what, it's the best one for. If you have done a performance and you'll come back.
Yeah.
Like if you've gone and done, you can do a big opener at the beginning to get them properly on board, and they kind of know what you're about. And then you can kind of come back and be like, right, now we're going to play.
Yeah.
That's what it's nice. But like I said, it kind of found its place as an opener just because of the structure of it. Fast, doesn't require any props to come out.
Yeah.
It just fits that space.
I think it perfectly sets the tone, though. Like, it sets I'm not going to be 100% serious. Plus, it also brings them down a little bit so that you can hit them in the teeth in a second when you tell them their aunt's middle name.
Yeah. And that's thing where, like, I say, like, if you're going to be honest, if you were going to chop one of these 2 fingers off, is that they're just like,
wait, what?
Wait, what? And again, that kind of sets up this thing that, like, just for fun, a lot of the things that I'm going to say and the things I'm going to ask you to think about are going to be a bit weird. So, like, we're going to leap into this with this weird thing to begin with. And so then later on, when I'm saying, like, I don't know, whatever peculiar little flight of fancy of your routines, you've already set the pace by being like, well, I've asked you to imagine which of my fingers you're going to chop off. It's such a weird thing. So it kind of, like, it frames it. Yeah, there you go.
Incredible.
What, like, the thing that worked nicely in the video, and like, it was a really weird, like, lecture. That was,
It's such a good lecture. You mentioned the Biz earlier, which is part of this lecture. Quinta is also part of this lecture, which in itself is an absolute gold mine of an idea. It's beautiful. Yeah. So if anybody hasn't seen Phil's lecture, please do go back and watch it, if not for the nostalgia trip that Phil's having right now. But yeah, the concepts in there still stand the test of time because there's some really, really clever stuff.
I've wondered like before about like, oh, if I went and did another lecture like that, what would I do? But the problem is I've kind of got a toolkit of routines and methods that I do. I still use the biz to do if I want to know what somebody's thinking. I still use Quinter all the time to develop new routines if I want to do a force or something like that. And so I once I've got a method, okay, and I get good at it, I tend to be okay. I'm happy with that. So like the biz kind of replaces peak wallets. And although it's not the most powerful peak in the world, there's lots of better peaks than that. It is the one that I am sort of most comfortable and most sort of fluid with. Yeah. So there's not really any particular driving force for me to like go back and find a different force or buy a new peak wallet, because the thing that they can do, I can already do. And like chasing after some methodological improvement is probably not going to be as effective in the long run as working out a better framing for it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. This is something that comes up quite often. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, with the Magic Circle in Newcastle, we have a few younger members that often ask, like, what would you suggest, like, learning going forward? And I always say, just find, like, 5 things that you can get really good at and just hold those, like a force, a peak, a control, and whether that's for mentalism purposes or whether it's for card stuff. Because the better you are at those and the less sort of scrambled your brain is among other things, the more it's going to pay dividends to you. That doesn't necessarily then mean further down the line increase that toolkit. But if you've got this structure, this framework that you can rely on, I think that's a great sort of starting point.
It's great advice. Once you've got those things, you can and you get good at like putting them together and combining them. You can kind of build any routine anyway. That's the gist of that ahead of the pack route that they were like, once you've got these sort of basic principles and concepts under your belt, you can recreate lots of other effects, pretty much,
Yeah, and you could also simplify and streamline a lot of things, because
absolutely.
A lot of shit nowadays is just convoluted for the sake of being convoluted. Like, look at how clever I am. That could have been a double
convolution, but there is something to be said for streamlining as well.
Yeah, of course. Incredible. We're going to move on to our sort of final segment as we wrap this up. This is our question deck segment. This is, I was going to say 52 cards. Every time I do this, I take the cards out. So this is like 40-something cards.
All right.
But each one is completely different. It's a completely random question ranging from something super random, like what's your favorite pizza topping, to something really prolific, like life questions. And then there's a few magic bits and pieces in the middle there as well. I just thought it would be a lot of fun to do, because I don't know what's coming, you don't know what's coming, and it makes it a lot of fun. So at any point you call out stop, there's no breaks, there's no rough and smooth, and we'll figure out what
I believe you, but
we'll figure out what we're asking Phill Smith today. Yeah, I'm like this. So anytime. Perfect. Your question is, what question do you wish people asked you more often?
That question. It's a meta answer.
Wow.
Do I wish people ask me more often? Question. Do you want a cup of coffee?
There you go. Next time I see you, I'm bringing a cup of coffee. Next convention, or next time I meet you.
Hazelnut latte with an extra shot, thank you.
There we go. Perfect. If you ever see Phill, next Blackpool, I want to see Phill sat at his table with 1,000 coffees around him, because everybody's like, there you go, hazelnut latte,
what an
extra
awful
shot.
prank that would be. Please don't do that, guys.
Oh no, see you like shaking on day 3, having not slept, still working through the coffees.
That's a Blackpool experience anyway, pretty much, isn't it?
It's
just with more coffees then. Yeah.
Excellent. As we wrap this up, the next question is, what are your plans for the future? Something that I want to touch on super quickly is you have the cabinet, which is a membership on your website. Can you briefly talk about that, and then some of the other future projects that are coming as well?
Cabinet is the like a atelier circulus. It's like a group project where there's a bunch of people. We've got about 8 or 9 people who've like bought into this, and together we sort of conceive of a trick, and then I do all of the design and manufacture for it, and they get it as a unique thing at the end. So we're right at the end of the first cycle of 2 months for this. We've got a really weird, really quite incredible piece with like beautiful props, which are currently in manufacture. And so those people are going to have this very like unique concept, unique props, unique piece. And there's going to be 10 of them, or however many people, I think is 9. I'll have one. And
this is specifically limited to that group. It doesn't then go public release.
Yeah, so it's not going to be released. Although we might think about that or something later down the line. We're adding that in. But the ones that exist now, so it's going to be a piece that's unique to them. But because of the fact that we've all been like integral to the process of conceptualizing it and coming up with it, it is a piece that is unique to them. So it has aspects of their personalities in it as well. It's really been a really interesting process to go through. And
that's so cool.
Starting the new one again, the next cycle soon, so right back to the beginning and start doing the conceptualizing for whatever the next piece is going to be. It's going to be really cool. I'm super excited to get this one in as well, the first cycle, because the piece is wild.
Oh, really sounds so intriguing. I urge people to check it out, and I might also check it out because it sounds like a lot of fun just to be involved in. Sounds like a magic cult is what it sounds like. But
well, I've not explicitly said that, but that is kind of the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds incredible. What are your other plans for the future? Do you have any more releases coming out? Do you have anything coming up? Anything you're updating? Obviously, you have an incredible project that you released at Blackpool. If you want to talk about that as well.
Well, that's kind of the thing that's looming as well. Switchblade is this magic app that I came up with. It's kind of like a virtual deck of cards that you can allow. It lets you very simply force or peak pretty much anything in a very kind of visual way. But it's become a very flexible tool, and we've added a lot of stuff in. It's currently on V3, the third version, which is out, and I'm working on V4, which is the big update. And there's a lot of really interesting aspects of that are being sort of developed in working with other people as well. I'm adding in, I don't know if I can talk about it, adding in like guest mode. So at the moment, you can kind of construct any routine using it, and it's kind of visually agnostic. It's just quite a kind of minimal look. But I'm working on versions that are based on, it's not necessarily by, but like in conversation with specific performers. So like you would go into the modes section, instead of selecting one of the existing modes, there's a guest modes, and it immediately jumps into a specific trick that is kind of designed for that person.
Like presets. From specific
so it's got a particular preset visual style. It'll have a different method that will work in its own way. It'll integrate with something else. So we've got a few of those lined up, and it's a really fascinating process of seeing how the tool that I originally came up with, which is this basic Switchblade concept and method, can be like expressed to fit somebody else's approach, because I've got the Phill Smith method, or everything's kind of like fits into this little window, whereas somebody else who's got a completely different approach and a completely different way of seeing magic is going to think of things that I would never have thought of, and this guest modes allows that to be a part of this project. It's really exciting to do, really interesting.
That sounds incredible.
If people go to phillsmithcreative.com, all of my stuff's on there, but Switchblade is the big thing at the moment that I'm kind of focusing on.
Perfect. Last question is, where can our listeners find you? Not specifically your house, but on social media, in this shed. This is where you can find it most times.
Pretty much 24/7. Yeah, so I'm all over Facebook and Instagram, Phill Smith Creative. If you go to phillsmithcreative.com, that's my website. And you can sign up to the mailing list there. That's pretty old school, isn't it? And get loads of
every month.
Waffle, and that's it. Yeah, nonsense like you've just listened to for some reason, but email to you rather than directly into your ears. Yeah, that's it. phillsmithcreative.com.
Perfect. As I say, I do urge you guys check out, especially Switchblade is sensational. Phil's Penguin Lecture and all of his other work, and all of the other work that he's had his fingers in as well. Can I just specifically say that your marked cards have been the staple marked decks that I have used for the past 10 plus years, because they are 1, deceptive, 2, beautiful, and 3, I could throw them halfway across the room and still read them. They are just absolutely phenomenal. So if people haven't already, checking out Elysian scripts or the DMC decks or any of the other wonderful stuff that Phil's created, I urge check it out. That's not me just blowing smoke up your ass. They are genuinely phenomenal.
Oh, thank you, dude.
Not a problem at all. Well, if you've made it this far, well done, for one, after our design rabbit hole. And 2, thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please do leave a review. Obviously, check out Phil's incredible work, and we shall catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.